Okay, so welcome to the last bit here of Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. So I'll play a little bit of this video.
Take a look at America today. Over 150,000 Americans are dead from COVID-19. We have a health crisis worsened by Trump's failure to act, an economic crisis deepened by Trump's failure to get the virus under control, a racial justice crisis fanned by Trump's words of hate, a climate crisis exacerbated by Trump's denial of science, and America needs a plan to solve all of them. Over the last century, America has defined itself by rising to meet existential challenges.
This great nation will endure as it has endured.
This country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested.
America is a place where all things are possible.
In order to meet the challenges of today, we can't just build back the way things were before. We have to build back better. We'll make the biggest investment in manufacturing and innovation since World War II, bringing back critical supply chains and ensuring the future is made in America by American workers. Today, federal investment in research and development is at an all-time low. That's why I'm proposing historic research and development investment to sharpen America's competitive edge in new industries. Experts say that this $300 billion investment could help create 3 million good-paying jobs in communities all across America. There's no more consequential challenge that we have to meet in the next decade than the onrushing climate crisis. We'll meet this challenge by creating millions of jobs in a clean energy economy, jobs that will ensure American automobile industry leads the world in manufacturing electric vehicles, with 500,000 charging stations all across the country. We'll ensure that America has the cleanest, safest, and fastest rail system in the world. We're going to make investments, so by the end of my first term, we are going to be on an irreversible course to achieve net zero emissions, economy-wide, no later than 2050. In order to build back better, we have to prioritize our caregiving workforce and free up hardworking Americans. My plan will put 3 million Americans to work. We'll work with states to offer every 3- and 4-year-old child in America access to free, high-quality preschool. Right now, low and middle-income families spend as much as 35% of their income on childcare. We'll make it so they won't ever have to spend more than 7% of their income. And we'll give more older Americans and people with disabilities the choice to get care in their home or in the community-based setting, starting with the 800,000 individuals currently on a waiting list to be able to do just that. In order to build back better, we have to ensure that all Americans have opportunities to generate wealth, especially communities of color that have been historically left out of the benefits of an economic recovery. That's why I'm going to take on our successful Obama-Biden Small Business Fund and scale it up to 20 times the size so that Black and brown small business owners have access to $150 billion in venture capital and low-interest financing. Times are tough now in America, but we've been here before. We can do this. We can build back better. And I'm looking forward to getting started as soon as we can.
Okay, so that was a nice little overview of the Build Back Better plan. So now we're going to get a little bit more specific into the racial equity across the American economy. So the largest issues here are there's a longstanding inequality in our country, racial disparities in healthcare, the economic crisis that's been going on right now is hitting Black and brown communities really the hardest out of any group in our country. And we're also seeing a national reckoning on racial justice and tragic human cost of systemic racism in the murder of George Floyd and so many other Black men and women and children in this country. And through all this, there's currently a climate crisis, which is getting worse, and it's hitting the Black and brown communities much harder. And so really the biggest ways forward that we have are mobilizing of an effort to resources to address these challenges and to advance racial equity across the American economy. Racial equity is incorporated in each of Biden's plans, and Biden will remove barriers to participation in our economy. expand access to opportunity, and fully enforce the policies and laws that are already on the books. And so now really what I want everyone to get out of this presentation isn't just like all the different specific details that Biden has, but really just the overall how detailed Biden's plans are. Trump really doesn't have any plans really in general, let alone plans to address systemic racism in our country. So without further ado, I guess we can just get into it. So spur public-private investment through a new small business opportunity plan. So this was discussed in the video. Small business ownership is the cornerstone of wealth building and jobs creation. There's persistent racial disparities in wealth and access to capital, combined with outright discrimination in the financial sector, which has contributed to inequalities in small business ownership, growth, and success. So what this will entail is a restart package to survive the current crisis and come out the other side stronger. Spur more than $500 billion in additional public, private, and venture capital to Black and brown entrepreneurs, expand access to $100 billion in low-interest business loans, eliminate barriers to technological assistance and advisory services, spur more than $50 billion in new equity investment and venture capital for entrepreneurs in economically disadvantaged areas. And that kind of connects to Joe Biden's plan to reform opportunity zones and to fulfill their promise. And so as of right now, we cannot close the racial wealth gap if we allow billionaires to exploit opportunity zone tax breaks to pad their wealth rather than investing in projects that benefit distressed low-income communities and Americans that are starting to make ends meet. So what Joe Biden wants to do is incentivize opportunity funds to partner with community-oriented organizations with a focus on creating jobs for low-income residents, directing that opportunity zone benefits by rewarded by the Department of Treasury, and detailed disclosures to ensure these tax benefits are only being allowed where there is clear economic, social, and environmental benefits, and the impact on social residents, including poverty status, housing affordability, and job creation is clear. Also, this is another point, is that make a historic commitment to equalizing federal procurement, designed to support small businesses and tackle longstanding inequalities in the federal contracting department. So require prime contractors to develop and execute plans to increase subcontracting opportunities for small disadvantaged businesses, expand long-term technical assistance and federal contracting preferences for small disadvantaged businesses, incentivize state and local governments and private sector partners to contract with small disadvantaged businesses, and strengthen implementation of the Buy Indian Act. This will make certain that the largest mobilization of public investments in procurement, infrastructure, and research and development since World War II is equitably distributed through the community and businesses. And so I'm gonna skip this video because we're kind of running out of time here, but I'm, like many of you heard at the beginning of the video, from Portland, Oregon, and I grew up in an area that was historically redlined, and this whole discussion about systemic racism comes from things such as redlining, which made it harder for individuals to kind of generate wealth through years of home ownership, and this led to what redlining did specifically was it kept majority minority neighborhoods away from such things as bank loans, city investments, and like many of you know, mortgages and houses are one of the main ways to generate wealth. And so many of these individuals were not able to access this wealth through homes, and these neighborhoods kind of led to what you saw kind of in the 70s and 80s. A lot of these neighborhoods were hit hard by economic disparities. So what Joe Biden's going to do is ensure his housing plan makes bold investment in home ownership and access to affordable housing for Black, brown, Native families. So racial inequality permeates the U.S. housing markets even today, even since the end of the redlining. So with home ownership rates for Black, Latino, and Native American households far below those of white counterparts, because home ownership is how many families save and build wealth, these racial disparities in home ownership contribute to the racial wealth gap. So help families buy their first homes and build wealth by creating a new refundable advanceable tax credit up to $15,000, scale up support for investing in homeownership and revitalization areas, spur the construction of 1.5 million homes and public housing units to address the affordable housing crisis, increase energy efficiency, and reduce racial wealth gap. So also the fair lending, eliminate state and local housing regulations, protect those facing eviction, housing affordability, rolling back the Trump programs that prevented fair lending and fair housing protections. Another large thing in Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan is education. And we kind of discussed this in our topics earlier, but to achieve equity in management, training, and higher education opportunities connect to the jobs of the future. So there's a stark racial disparities that exist at every stage of our education system. These disparities compound and contribute to inequalities in the economic, health, and housing and criminal justice outcomes. And so what Joe Biden wants to do is create relief from student loan debt, COVID-19 payment of $10,000, cancellation of $10,000, increase grants, protection from predatory lenders, debt forgiveness, make public colleges free for families earning less than $125,000, which that's a big one. Invest in historically Black and brown universities and make them more affordable and create career paths. Also, Joe Biden wants to boost retirement security and financial wealth for Black, brown, and Native families, help Black and brown Americans have more opportunities to build a nest egg. And so really all the other slides that you've seen kind of comes down to this, is just building that retirement plan for the future. By equalizing tax benefits of defined contribution plans, give small businesses a tax break for starting a retirement plan, giving workers the chance to save at work, so an automatic 401k, and open the door for asset managers owned by Black and brown people. Okay, and then ensure workers of color are compensated fairly and treated with dignity. Workers of color still earn a fraction of what white workers are and are less likely to have essential benefits like health coverage and paid leave. In fact, the Black and white wage gap persists across every level of education and is widening. Ensure workers of color are paid fairly and pay discrimination. Increase the federal minimum wage to $15, which is another big part of Joe Biden's plan. Stop employers from denying workers overtime pay that they've earned, which Trump reversed. Address discrimination and harassment in the workplace, the HERD Act. Guarantee up to 12 weeks paid family and medical leave for all the workers and up to 7 days of paid sick, family, and safe leave. Make it easier for workers of color and all workers to organize unions and bargain collectively. Invest in infrastructure in the Black and brown communities. As we know, there's a lot of bad infrastructure in the country, but there's many crumbling infrastructure is a barrier to growth and prosperity. And we are the world's richest nation, but far too long Black, Latino, and Native American communities have been left behind. And that's kind of like what goes back to redlining and a history of discrimination in this country when it comes to housing. Update and add air conditioners for elementary, middle, and high schools. Incentivize supermarkets for being healthy, fresh foods for communities, and that's a big one because food deserts are something that persists in America in the 21st century. Invest in facilities where victims of crime can access health, navigators, mental health, addiction, and trauma recovery services. A national effort to create the jobs we need to build a modern, sustainable, accessible infrastructure now and deliver an equitable, clean future. He'll make a $2 trillion accelerated investment, set a goal that disadvantaged communities can receive 40% of overall benefits of spending in the areas of clean energy and energy efficient deployment, clean, accessible transit and transportation, affordable and sustainable housing, training and workforce development, remediation and reduction of legacy pollution, and development of critical clean water infrastructure. And these are only just really the tip of the iceberg for Joe Biden's plans. When we were going through all of Joe Biden's plans, these are kind of just the main points that we could find.
Okay, Hunter,
And
you
I
ready?
think, yeah, and I think this is Emily's now going to take over for this.
Yeah, so I'll just say next slide because I'll just leave it with your screen being shared. I'm just gonna hurry and introduce myself. I'm Emily Harmon. I'm 20. I go to USU. Why? I was a Yang supporter, love Andrew Yang, but here we are, and like literally, my life depends on voting for Joe Biden. So I'm super passionate about his platform, which is actually like really good. If you go to his website, you can learn a lot more than what we're telling you, but he does have like a really good platform, so check it out. Second chances for economic success. Basically, by using smart data infrastructure, the Biden campaign wants to give people who are convicted and like spend time in jail, they want to be able to give them a second chance so that they can contribute to the economy and be able to get jobs and not be able to like be discriminated against because of their previous criminal records, which I think is really great because like we want people to contribute to our economy. Next slide. This one. So strengthening the Federal Reserve's focus on racial economic gaps. The biggest part of this that I thought was really cool is they want to be able to give a real-time payment system, which would allow for low-income people to receive the money they're owed from like employers like instantly. So that could be daily, weekly, whatever, but that means they're not waiting like weeks and living like paycheck to paycheck, waiting for their money to come through, which I thought was really great. Next. This guy. Prioritize racial equity across the federal government. So implementing the 10-20-30 plan to ensure that low-income places that are underfunded and have been underfunded for decades get investment in federal dollars go to them. Promoting diverse leadership for all federal agencies, because as we know, the US government isn't diverse. And then eliminating language barriers for Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Next. Build a 21st century care infrastructure. He talked about this briefly in the video, and especially right now, I think this is very important with COVID-19, because if we want parents and guardians to be able to get back to work, they need to know that their children can be cared for and that it's affordable, because childcare is super expensive in this country. Along with this plan, he wants to offer the actual caregivers and like teachers themselves better training, higher paying jobs, because I think a lot of times we undervalue people in those positions and look down on them. And a lot of them are people of color, and this is a way to like uplift the people in those jobs. Next. Addressing the long-standing inequalities in agriculture. This is one of my favorite ones because I'm all for like community gardens and everything like that. Black, brown, and Native farmers have long faced barriers to growing their agriculture businesses, including unfair prices, unequal access to government support, retaliation for civil rights complaints, and outright injustice. So he will establish an equity commission that will focus on the unique and regulatory barriers that Black, brown, and Native farmers, ranchers, and fishers must face. Protect heir property, meaning if you are an heir to them, you can have equal access to federal credit and agriculture programs, establishing a farmland trust, and expanding protection for farm workers.
And then really this is the last slide here. The biggest question for many people is, how is he going to pay for all these things, you know, the almighty dollar? So what he's going to be doing is he's going to reverse Trump's tax cuts for corporations and the wealthy, 1.6 trillion, raise the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%, raise the top individual income tax rates from 35% back to 39.5%, make common sense tax reforms that finally make the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share. So making $2.2 trillion, tax capital gains and dividends on ordinary income, increase the minimum tax on foreign income from 10.5 to 21%, phase out business income deductions about above 400,000, cap the value of itemized deductions for high earners, and increase the Social Security earnings cap for wages over 400,000. So that's how he's going to pay for that. And I think really just making common sense tax reform is another key part of Biden's plan. So really in the end, he'll be able to get much more money than is needed to cover all his plans.